With just 5 days until the deadline, the U.S. House has passed a funding measure to avert a government shutdown. The legislation, essentially another stopgap measure, extending the deadline to keep the government afloat now until December 20th. And it includes new funding for the Secret Service. This bill comes after the House failed to pass a 6-month GOP funding plan last week. That plan included a controversial measure targeting non-citizen voting.
The bipartisan CR we negotiated is, of course, what most people expected. A short-term CR, one that does not last 6 months, free of poison pills, and that honors the bipartisan funding levels we agreed to earlier this year.
Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal joins us now. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Joyce. It's always great to be with you.
Let's start with the voting. House voting on this funding package began 2 hours earlier than expected. Why?
Well, really, let me just back up for a second and say why we're even in this position. It's because the Republican majority has not been able to pass their own appropriations bills. And so as a result, we have no new appropriations bills for this year. We should have been done already with that. That has not happened. And so in order for government to not shut down, we needed to pass what's called a continuing resolution. All that does is it continues the funding at the same levels that we have, but it continues to bring uncertainty for, thousands of federal workers and the TSA and education, all the things that are funded by government. They don't have a budget yet for next year. This continuing resolution could have been passed months ago so that we wouldn't be just 5 days before government funding ends and we face a shutdown. But Republicans tried twice, Joyce, to pass partisan bills on the floor that didn't just extend the funding, but actually attach things to it that Democrats couldn't vote for. Republicans themselves couldn't vote for it. So they didn't have enough votes. They had to pull those bills. And finally, we did what everyone knew we would do in the end, which is vote for what's called a clean continuing resolution through December 20th.
How do you think the election's going to impact the December 20th deadline beyond that in terms of funding the government?
Well, I do think that if Democrats are able to win the White House and win the House and win the Senate, it becomes much easier because we know that even if you pushed it into the new year, it would be very difficult. Same thing if the Democrats win 2 chambers. I think you would have the same exact situation where we would have the upper hand. And again, like I said, we really shouldn't even be arguing about this because the top lines were set with that debt ceiling deal. Unfortunately, Republicans had to elect a new speaker. We spent a lot of time doing that. That was the speaker that had made the deal. Then suddenly they went back on it. It's been a very difficult Congress this year.
And finally, also unprecedented, 2 assassination attempts on a candidate leading up to the election. Now we have this additional $230 million in emergency funding for the Secret Service. Tell us more about that and the unprecedented need for that.
It is horrific. These assassination attempts against Donald Trump are horrific. The reality is that anytime you move to violence, this is absolutely unacceptable. We vote. That is how we deal with our differences in policy. That is how we address everything that is before us. We vote. We have a democracy. Violence has no place in America. And I think that, we also recognize that the threats to us as members of Congress, to presidential candidates, to the vice president herself as our presidential candidate, have to be increased or have increased. And therefore, we have to increase the resources that we put into ensuring that all of our presidential candidates are protected. I think all members of Congress should be protected, having gone through something very scary at my own home. And so this is a beginning to that. We did put money into making sure that we up the security for the Secret Service to be able to protect Donald Trump and Vice President Harris. And I think that that was not a partisan issue. We all felt that that was the case. I do think there's also a lot of things that happened with the Secret Service that need to really be looked at. There were real errors in how everything unrolled, particularly in the first assassination attempt. And so I just think we have to condemn these assassination attempts against Donald Trump without any qualification. We have to invest in the security for all of us. And we have to tell the American people that this kind of violence, any kind of violence, is unacceptable. Let's use our votes. Let's use the ballot box. Let's preserve our democracy. That is how we win.
Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us from Washington, D.C. tonight. We appreciate it.